I know I'm a bit late, but I decided to go ahead and show you what I made with the beads from the Bargain Bead Box for the month of June. If you're interested, keep watching. Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Luisa. Thank you so much for joining me today. Well, I'm back from my vacation and I've been super busy, which is one of the reasons why I'm so late publishing this video. But I went to the West Coast and had a wonderful time with my family over there. I love going there because the weather is just absolutely gorgeous. And I've been trying to catch up with all of the videos that I'm supposed to be doing. I have tons of tutorials that I'm supposed to be doing, unboxings that I'm supposed to be making. And so I'm going to have to really get disciplined to try to finish all of those videos. Who else had trouble with the Bargain Bead Box for June? I certainly did, I'll admit, okay? I had a very difficult time finding inspiration. And I know I'm not alone. I know many of you had trouble as well. Some of you probably didn't, but I know many of you did. And that's the reason why I decided to go ahead and make this video, to show you what I made and to inspire those of you who had trouble making jewelry pieces. You know, out of all the videos that I make, I'm always a little hesitant making videos about my finished jewelry pieces, and I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's because I don't feel that I'm that great. I know some of you don't like to hear that, but that's how I feel. But nevertheless, I like to do these videos because I know many of you are brand new and many of you have trouble finding inspiration. So hopefully by showing you what I made, it can inspire you to create your own designs. So anyway, I want this video to be positive. I want to show you what I made, and maybe you'll like them, maybe you won't. But in addition to showing you my finished pieces, I've also turned this video into like a mini tutorial. It's not going to be a full-blown tutorial. I'm not going to be showing you step by step, but I will give you a glimpse of how I created each of the pieces. So you'll get to see how I made 5 necklaces and 2 bracelets and some earrings. So anyway, guys, I'm hoping you enjoyed this video. Sit back, relax, and let's go ahead and get started. So in my first piece, I decided to go with a chandelier focal. It was a large 26 by 59 millimeter curved focal, and I had an idea of making some kind of pendant with a tassel or drops, and so I decided to use the gorgeous 6 millimeter English cut crystal round beads, and I arranged them down below, hanging off the loops. At the end of each drop, I added a 6 millimeter Lapis Lazuli round gemstone bead, as well as a 3 by 2 millimeter crystal rondelle bead in that gorgeous indigo color. I then pulled out a bunch of head pins that I had in my stash. Each one was pretty long, so I was able to arrange all of the beads on one. I love using these head pins because they're super long, and I often take the heads off and convert them to eye pins. And another reason I like them is because the wire is actually pretty hard, and so I like using them to build beaded components as well. But anyway, I threaded on all of the beads, and I did that for each one of the drops before actually attaching them. And once they were all threaded on, I decided to do a simple loop to attach them onto the focal. And then I simply attach them one by one, starting with the one in the middle. I already had an idea of how many loops apart each one would be. After I hung the center drop, I realized there was a little bit of a problem with the pendant. It turns out that the number of loops to the right of the center loop was 13, and the number of loops to the left was 14. So even though the pendant had a loop in the dead center, it didn't have the same amount of loops to the right and left of it. But anyway, I managed to make it work, and I hung my drops spaced out evenly, except for one of them, which actually has an extra loop in between drops. But it really wasn't that noticeable, thank goodness. So after hanging the drops, I then decided I would tackle the strands, and I pulled out some rondelles that I had in my stash that were the same color as the English cut rounds. And I did that because I didn't have enough of the rounds to make the strands. So I arranged a combination of the rondelles and some of the Lapis Lazuli 6mm beads. And I built components using the long head pins that I had in my stash. And again, I just did some simple loops for each of the components. I also wanted to include some of the 3x2 crystal rondelles to tie the whole thing in. So I added one at each end of the 6mm Lapis Lazuli round bead. After building all the components, it was time to connect the whole thing. So I simply took one of the components, opened up a loop, attached it to the focal, closed up my loop really well, and I continued doing the same thing with all the components one by one until I had the desired length. I did one side and then I did the other side. My necklace ended up being about 18 inches long, including the clasp. And it was just a simple lobster claw clasp, as you can see. And I used some 6mm jump rings. After completing the necklace, I decided to make a second necklace, a simple one using that large corrugated porcelain melon bead that came in the box, along with some of the bead caps. And I simply used another head pin, made a simple loop at one end, attached the bead caps and the bead, closed off the other end with another simple loop, and then I used the roller chain that they included in the box. I attached one end of the chain to the component, figured out how long I needed the chain to be, and then I cut myself a second length. And attached the other one to the other end of the component. So then all I had to do was attach a clasp, and I used another lobster claw clasp. I like to have two separate necklaces because then it gives the wearer the option of wearing one or the other or both. I absolutely love the Z-style agate round beads that they gave us in a 10mm size, and I thought I'd start this design by grabbing one of the beads and using it as a focal. At this point I wasn't sure which direction I was going to take, but I went ahead and threaded it onto an eye pin, making a loop at one end and another one at the other end. It was just a simple loop. Once I had the focal done, I pulled out the red cathedral style round beads that they gave us in the 8mm size, and I arranged them. And again, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but then I pulled out the white jade crystal rondelles that they gave us and the gemstone pendant. I also pulled out some red and blue 2x3 crystal rondelles that I had in my stash, and I had an idea in my head that I would thread them onto some jump rings. So I pulled out some large jump rings. I think these were 8mm in size. And I also wanted to use some 8O seed beads in an antique silver color. I then started arranging some piles of beads for my jump rings. Each pile had 2 red rondelles, 2 blue ones, and 2 silver seed beads, for a total of 6 beads per pile. After I arranged my piles, I started threading them onto the jump rings in a random fashion. And then I simply closed the jump ring really well. And I continued to thread the beads onto the jump rings until I had the desired amount of jump rings loaded. After threading the jump rings, I then made some components using some eye pins on each of the large beads. And then I went ahead and connected the jump rings to the components, the beaded components. I had a total of 8 jump rings. And I made sure that my seed beads were spaced out evenly, so I had 3 on either side of the connecting point. I built one strand, attached the focal bead, and then I built the other strand. And then I attached it with another jump ring. So once I completed the lower portion of the necklace, I then decided I would use some smaller 4mm round beads that I had in my stash, faceted rounds in the same jade white color. I used some eye pins again and proceeded to thread on the small beads. Making simple loops at each end. After I made a bunch of them, I then connected it to the bottom part of the necklace. I measured my necklace and it was the right size. It was going to be a choker style necklace, about 16 inches long, including the clasp. So then after I finished my necklace, I decided to make a second necklace to go with it using the point pendant. And I wanted the necklace to be pretty long, using a lot of chain. And for this necklace, I wanted to use similar beads, so I used the red cathedral beads, as well as the blue rondelles and the red ones, and the 6mm Lapis Lazuli rounds, as well as the white jade crystal rondelles. I started with a bottom piece of chain that was a little bit longer than the rest. And then I proceeded to build some components using some eye pins. Again, I used simple loops for this one. I built components with the large bead in the middle and 2 little tiny rondelles, one at each end. And then I connected them to the chain as I built them. And I did that because I wanted them to be random. I wanted the colors to be random. Each one of the pieces of chain was about 1.5 inches long, and if you're curious, it was about 16 links per piece. So I kept connecting the components and chain until I had a decent length, and my necklace was going to be about 24 inches long, including the clasp. So I pulled out some jump rings and a lobster claw clasp and went ahead and attached them. And I was pretty pleased with this necklace. I really like the random arrangement of the colors, and it looks absolutely gorgeous with a choker style necklace. And once again, I like the option of having two separate necklaces. Well, I wasn't going to stop until I used the gorgeous crackle agate round beads in that marine blue color. That was so pretty. And for this one, I did want to lay out my design. I had an idea that I would use the round beads as well as some round link chain that I had in my stash. Each of the links of the chain were 8mm in size, same size as the beads. So once again, I pulled out my long head pins, and I also pulled out some 18 gauge wire to build a component. And I pulled out my one-step looper, guys, because I love this tool and it just makes the job so much easier. Sometimes I pull it out just because I'm tired, you know, and so for me it's so much easier and quicker to use this tool. But you do have to be careful because you don't want to shatter your gemstones. It's easy to do if you don't know how to use it. The only thing with a looper is that you do have to make some adjustments to your loop after you get it done. But if you practice enough with it, you'll find out that it becomes easier and your loops turn out really nice. By the way, I never waste my head pins, so whatever is left over from my head pins I use to make eye pins. So some of the beads had a head pin and the other beads had two loops, one on each end. That's one of the reasons why I like to draw out a design ahead of time, because then I know exactly how I'm going to build my components and which ones are going to have head pins and which ones are going to have loops. After I built all my components, I was then ready to thread them onto some 18 gauge wire. So I snipped off a piece that was about 6 inches long approximately. I smoothed out all the kinks using some nylon coated pliers. And then I proceeded to make a large loop at one end, a simple loop. After I made the loop, I went ahead and started threading my beads, and I started just with a single bead. And then based on my design, I knew exactly which component to connect next. So I connected one of the large links first, and then I connected a gemstone to the bottom of the large link. I threaded it onto the wire, and I needed that small jump ring attached to the large link so that it would lay properly up against the other beads on that wire. As you can see, I built the second component, threaded that on, and then another bead. And here's my third component, a little bit longer than the other one. And another bead. As you can see, they're graduating in size. And then I built my center component, which is the longest one. Threaded that on. And then another bead. And then I proceeded to build the rest of the components, graduating down in size. Ending with a single bead. Now all I had to do is snip off the excess wire. And form another loop. Making sure that it was the same size as the loop at the other end. After completing the focal piece, I then had to decide what to do for the strands. And luckily I had some beautiful agate beads in my stash that were very similar in color. And I pulled them out because I had run out of the other ones that came with a box. And I built some components, some simple components with simple loops. I reserved 2 dark ones for earrings for later. After connecting the two components, I then decided that I would use the large link chain so that the whole thing would coordinate. And I snipped off pieces that had 3 links each. Connected some more of the agate beads to those. And then when I was satisfied with the length, I decided to finish it off with just some chain and added a lobster claw clasp. And here are the earrings using the same chain and the agate beads that I had put aside. My next project was going to include this beautiful brass compass connector bead, and it was absolutely cute, but at first I didn't know what to do with it, and so I kind of waited a little bit until something came to mind, and I decided I would make a bracelet with the white jade crystal rondelles. I pulled out some spacer beads that I had in my stash, some crystal spacer beads, rhinestone spacer beads, because they picked up the rhinestones of the compass connector. I also wanted to use the toggle clasp that came in the box, but unfortunately it had started to tarnish, so I thought I would treat it with some tarnish remover. So I thought I would remove the tarnish with some cloth that came in that kit, and they did a great job of removing the tarnish, but I didn't want to give it too much elbow grease because then you run the risk of losing the finish of the metal, the silver finish. But anyway, I was able to remove the tarnish, and then I went ahead and brushed on some protectant. It came with a kit as well, some jewelry protectant coating. And then I did let it dry for quite a while. After it dried, I went ahead and pulled out some of the polishing cloths that came in the kit, and I went ahead and rubbed off any excess coating or stickiness, and then using the polishing cloth I went ahead and rubbed each piece until it was nice and shiny and clean. And this took me quite a while, guys. Okay, so if you're thinking about using this kit, just know that you have to let the protectant dry for quite a few hours before you do the final polish. For my bracelet, I wanted to use a charm, one of the charms that came with the kit, so I pulled out one of these spacer beads that has a loop on it. pulled out some 49 strand Melon wire. And I snipped off a good piece. I think it was about 10 inches long. And the nice thing about Melon is that they always tell you what size crimp bead to use. And I had the exact same size that I needed in my stash. And I've actually made this design quite a few times. I sell this type of bracelet in my Etsy store. And so I've had a lot of practice making this type of bracelet. I don't use the compass connector each time. I use a different kind of connector, but the design is pretty identical. So I went ahead and attached the crimp bead first. Using my favorite pliers, the Xuron pliers, crimping pliers. By the way, the crimp beads are actually size 2 if you're interested. So anyway, after I attached the crimp bead, I went ahead and started threading my beads, and the rhinestone spacer beads and the Tibetan style charm bead or holder. The entire bracelet was about 7 inches long, including the clasp. And I went ahead and added the crimp bead to the other end, attached the round part of the toggle clasp, the ring, and I did want to use crimp covers. These are 4mm in size to cover up the crimp beads. So I picked out 2 in an antique silver color. And I used these crimp pliers to close the crimp covers. They work really well, but you do have to be careful that you don't dent your crimp covers. So then I decided to attach the toggle part of the toggle clasp using a jump ring. And then using a separate jump ring, a larger one, I attached the charm to the center of the bracelet. But this bracelet turned out pretty cute. I love how the rhinestone spacer beads coordinate with the gorgeous compass connector. I thought I was done, but then I realized that I hadn't used the beautiful red rondelle beads that came in the box, and I hadn't used very many of those lovely crystal rondelle beads in the indigo color. Plus I had some 6mm Lapis Lazuli beads left over, and so I pulled out my crystal rondelles from my stash and I decided I would do a bead weaving project. And I was going to make a bracelet using some 6-pound fire line. And I pulled out some 11O seed beads in an antique silver color, as well as some 15O seed beads that I had in my stash. So this is just a brief overview of what I did with the beads, guys. It's not a step-by-step because it just would have taken too long for me to go over the steps of making this bracelet. But as you can see, I just went ahead and built some components using the beads, and I chose the colors in a random fashion again. Each of the components has 3 red rondelles and 3 of the crystal rondelles, but they're arranged randomly. I attached 11O seed beads in between each one, as you can see. And then after completing the ring, I attached one of the 6mm Lapis Lazuli round beads in the middle using some additional seed beads. And each component is finished in the back as well. I used 15O seed beads to finish the back of each one. And it took me quite a while to make this bracelet, but I was able to finish it, and I added a toggle clasp. And one of the nice things about this bracelet is the gorgeous beaded toggle clasp. Well, that's the full collection. I hope you enjoyed seeing all the different designs. If you liked this video and you like what you saw, please don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to select one of these necklaces, put it on, and I'll come back and say goodbye. Well, I chose this one because I love crackle agate beads, and I love this color and I love this design. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like I said before, I wanted to go ahead and make this video to try to inspire those of you who had trouble with the June box. Hopefully I achieved that, and hopefully I've given you some inspiration to make your own designs. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Have a great day. Bye.